Well, welcome back to the show. We turn now to stories making news this week involving U.S. President Donald Trump. Still with us is Sourabh Gupta. He's a senior fellow at the Institute for China-America Studies. Also with us from Florida is author and commentator Dan Perkins. And joining us now on the set is Diana Castaneda. She is a political correspondent and anchor for NTN 24. Welcome to the show, Diana.
Thank you very much for having me.
You're welcome. Dan, let me start with you this time. A big story in Washington today, the resignation of the Trump press secretary, Sean Spicer. Two ways of looking at this, I guess. One, it's a setback. The other way of looking at it is this offers the president an opportunity to reset his communications team. What did you make of it?
I think I like the latter better. When you have never held public office before and you're starting to learn how to run a government, you try and pick the best possible people that you can. And sometimes you pick right and sometimes you pick wrong. And Mr. Spicer did a great job, but Mr. Trump wants to go in a different direction, and it was time for him to move on. And we brought in a new communications director, and we have a person now stepping in to take over the press secretary. I would have to say, if you look back over the last 6 months and you look at Sean Spicer's tenure, and you look at all of the adverse news and the fake news and everything that was thrown at Donald Trump and directly at Sean Spicer, he's got to be exhausted. And so I'm not surprised that he left, and we may see more of that if the media continues to attack the president and his policies.
But given what you've just said, should not the president have chosen someone who could last a bit longer than 6 months?
Well, possibly, but remember that the president said that he did not realize when he came into office how adversarial the relationship was going to be with the news and how vicious they have been. So he underestimated that. I don't think anybody necessarily could have figured that out. But I look at the press secretary job. He's there being beat on 24 hours a day. It's a really, really tough job.
Diana, President Trump also made news this week when, during an interview with the New York Times, he criticized his Attorney General, Jeff Sessions. Now, the Attorney General recused himself from the Russia investigation, which has preoccupied this town for the last 6 months. How much of an impact is that having here?
Well, I want to make a comment, if I can, about what the other guests said. Before, I was at the White House today, and I cover the White House daily. So what we saw today on the White House was the chaos inside of the White House. Because the White House is so focused now in this investigation and this scandal about the investigation related with the interference of Russia, that they don't know how to handle the narrative. So the new director of communications, of the new press secretary, they are the face of the White House, the voice of the president, but you can control the narrative when the president is tweeting all the time. They don't know what the president is going to do or is going to say it. And especially because right now there's a lot of pressure from the media, and the discussion is not about the communications director style. It's about why the White House is hiding information from the media, or what's the main purpose behind of this administration. And now going for trying to answer your question, Sessions was one of the first senators who support President Donald Trump, and he's been very loyal to the president. So it's kind of shocking what we saw this week. And will be a huge mistake for the president if he decides to remove him from the office, because we're going to see a brutal confirmation process on the Senate.
Although the president did say today that he has confidence in Jeff Sessions.
Yeah, exactly. But what our sources said inside of the Congress and inside of the White House is that maybe the president has a different intention and is trying to appoint a new general attorney in order to get more control over the investigation, not only as a general attorney, but of the FBI director and also of Mueller, because the president has been talking against Mueller. So it's two sides to see what's going on in Washington now.
Sourabh, the Russia investigation, it's just not going away, is it? Next week we have the president's son, Donald Trump Jr., as well as his former campaign director, Paul Manafort, who are going to be testifying before the Senate Judiciary Committee. What has this Russian investigation done to the presidency so far? It seems to have just preoccupied everything, or as a lot of people have been saying, sucking the oxygen out of it.
That's absolutely true. It's just been going on, and it's just been getting deeper and deeper, and the president himself feels that that this is hurting his agenda significantly and can come and hurt him personally. And it's just, from a standing back, it's just it's sad to note that the focus of this country and of the political establishment out here is so focused on Russia, because at the end of the day, we are talking about the 2016 elections, and those 2016 elections were basically determined by about 2% or 3% of the vote in Rust Belt states, right, which had some particular grievances and some particular reasons they voted for Mr. Trump, and those were not connected to Russia. There was a particular message coming out from the electorate which put Mr. Trump over the line across, as per the electoral college, though not in the popular majority, and so from that perspective, the country is still trapped in Russia and will stay trapped in Russia for quite a while. While, I mean, there are so many important more issues, and Russia, I think, at the end of the day, did not even determine the outcome of that election.
Well, it's certainly a big issue right now. Dan, what do you make of this Russia issue? Was there any kind of mismanagement on the part of the president's communications team right at the beginning? Should they have come out right at the beginning and said, look, this has been our contacts with Russia, these have been the staff members who've been in contact with Russian officials, etc., now let's put that to rest?
I don't think that the media is going to let it to rest. Let me show you something here. Here's polls that just came out yesterday. The first one is a Reuters poll that says that 88% of the people who voted for Mr. Trump would vote for him again. Only 85% of Hillary's voters said they would vote again for her. Now think about the punishment that Mr. Trump has taken for the first 6 months, and he still retained 88% of the people who had voted for him. The second is an NPR PBS Marist poll that says that America trusts Trump more than the media. And the last one is the Zogby poll, which says that 57% of Americans believe that the media has gone too far with the Russian story. Dianne Feinstein, the vice chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, continues to say in public, there is nothing there. And so the characterization that there's all this bad stuff hiding in the Trump administration is not hunting with the American people.
Just one other thing. As far as the president's legislative agenda is concerned, Dan, not much success there. The health bill reform has collapsed.
Well, the healthcare, that's an interesting question. Healthcare reform. Is there any part of the American Constitution that requires the federal government to provide health care? No. Mr. Trump said earlier in the week that he believed we should just let Obamacare die on its own.
Right.
Now you think about what's going to happen here. You've got a presidential or an election in 2016, midterm.
Yeah.
And between now and then, you've got 2 rate adjustments. If the Republicans do nothing, the Democrats are going to be destroyed, because the rate increases and the insurance companies that pull out of the market are going to make it very tough on American people.
Okay. Dan, I'm going to move on. Dan, I want to get to you. One big foreign policy issue for this administration, that is Venezuela. The president is threatening sanctions against Venezuela if it changes its constitution. What kind of reaction is that kind of threat getting in Venezuela and in Latin America?
Well, it has a lot of power. I mean, early this year, the White House had some sanctions against the vice president of Venezuela because he was related with some drug trafficking, and then later we saw in May that more sanctions against members of the Supreme Court. So what's different now is more than 100 people died in the past 100 days, most of them at the hands of the police officials. And there is a clear intention by the government, by the President Maduro, to continue and advance with this Constituent Assembly. So the question is if the White House is going to advance in a special sanction against the main or major officials of the Maduro's government who are related with crimes or narco-traffic, or if we are going to see for the first time this special ban on buying Venezuelan oil that could be the beginning of the end of the Maduro's regime, but will make even worse the crisis that the humanitarian crisis that is facing Venezuela.
Okay, that's where we're going to have to leave it. Diana, Dan, Sourabh, thanks to all of you for being with us. That's it for this edition of The Heat, and thanks again for joining us. Have a great weekend.